Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Right, this is QuranStep, Surah 19, verse 2, C, Uthmani Codex and Dialects. So, very briefly, this is a very rapid run through this whole topic. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu became the first Khalifa. His Khilafah will be from 11 Hijri to 13 Hijri. And in the middle of his Khilafah was the Battle of Yamama. It was against Musaylama al-Kadhab, Musaylama the liar, because he falsely claimed to be a prophet. And during this battle, many of the memorizers of the Quran, Huffaz, were killed. And because of this, Umar radiallahu anh realized that this could spell trouble. So he came to Abu Bakr radiallahu anh and he said, compile the Quran, please. Put it all from A to Z, from beginning, Surah Al-Fatiha to An-Nas, at least in one big document. Abu Bakr initially said, no, I'm not going to do what the Prophet didn't do, but then he was convinced. He realized that, yes, if this didn't happen, the later generations of Muslims would be confused. So he commissioned Zayd bin Thabit, as recorded in Bukhari, hadith number 4986, and the first Mus'haf, or copy, we could call it codex, means a copy of something in its original manuscript form, usually written on paper or leaves or hides, etc. And this was a comprehensive codex. In other words, had all the surahs in the Quran, all the verses of the Quran. Other people still had copies that were present, their personal copies that they may have memorized or written when the Prophet was alive, and they were also present in various dialects. Remember, the most key dialect, of course, is the Quraysh, and then there were other dialects of the major tribes. Abu Bakr radiallahu anh dies in 13 Hijri, and that copy of the Quran, this is passed on to Umar radiallahu anh. He dies 10 years later and is killed in 23 Hijri, and before he dies he gives that copy to Hafsa radiallahu anha. And you may wonder, why didn't he give it to the next Khalifa, Uthman radiallahu anh? Because at his death, Uthman radiallahu anh had not been chosen. Umar radiallahu anh had set a committee of 6 people, and it was their job to choose. He didn't follow Abu Bakr's choice of naming the next Khalifa. So, eventually, the dialects were not a problem during this particular initial stage of Islam. Why? That's because most Muslims were then native Arabic speakers. And so they understood what was a dialect, and they understood when somebody is reciting something slightly differently, that was acceptable. For example, let's take the word. In USA, people call petrol gas, whereas in the United Kingdom, they call it petrol, and in many other parts of the world. Now imagine you never knew this, and a person from England or person from, let's say, some other part of the world, from Lesotho, comes to America, where in their country they use the word petrol. They come to America and they say, and the person says, do you want to put gas in your car? I say, no, I want to put petrol. And he would be confused. So if you are not familiar, you will not realize that this word is exactly the same word as petrol. Similarly, in England, the word I in Scotland means yes. But people who don't know this may not understand that. So, as new Muslims started to enter into Islam, the majority of them were non-Arabs. And that's why in Armenia, Hudayfa radiallahu anh detected that this dialect, the difference in dialects, was causing immense confusion, to the extent that people were saying, what you're reciting in Salah is not the Quran, and therefore you must be a non-Muslim. They were making takfir of each other. So Hudayfa radiallahu anh goes back and reports this to Uthman radiallahu anh, and he agrees that yes, we need to standardize on one dialect, so that later generations who will lose access to the richness of the Arabic language will not get confused. So he asked Hafsa radiallahu anh, give me that copy that you have from Abu Bakr radiallahu anh, and we will copy it and publish it. That's a key point. So we'll make copies and we'll send the copies to different parts of the Muslim world with reciters. So he set a committee of 4 people: Zayd bin Thabit, Abdullah bin Zubair, Sa'id bin al-As, and Abdul Rahman bin Harith bin Hisham. And Zayd bin Thabit, the same Zayd bin Thabit radiallahu anh, who was responsible for compiling the first codex with Abu Bakr radiallahu anh. And what they tried to do was quite really amazing as a project. What they tried to do is they tried to code, because when we write something, we're effectively coding language. And they tried to code every variant, every dialect variant into the text. But sometimes it was not reconcilable, it's not codable. And then Uthman radiallahu anh directed them, he said, if that happens, then you will standardize, your default option will be the Qurayshi dialect. And this way of writing the Quran or coding the Quran is called Ar-Rasm al-Uthmani. Ar-Rasm literally means drawing, and Uthmani. So we loosely use the word font, or a more formal word would be orthography, the way we write letters. So their aim was, whenever they coded things, to maximize the number of dialects that were written. So that's why you have this thing. So Rahmah, if it was spelled like that, then it would not code the dialect of Tay, which was Rahmat. And those particular ayat would have been revealed by a chain of narration from the Prophet through Jibreel alayhi salam with that also dialect, as well as the Qurayshi normal other dialect, which is Rahmah. So by doing it like this, writing it like this, they had coded for both. They didn't lose any thing. So it was what they call a lossless codex. I don't know if you've ever talked about this in when you take an image in the internet, you can crunch it. When you crunch it, sometimes some crunching things lose some of the data in the picture. And some crunching algorithms don't lose that. And that's called a lossless codec. And we could think about it that the Rasm al-Uthmani is a high fidelity, tried to keep as much as the dialects as possible. In order to make that really clear, Uthman radiallahu anh, with the agreement of all the Sahaba, burned all the other fragments of the Quran to prevent later confusion and this chaos caused by people not understanding what's going on. So, when we write the Quran, is using the Uthmani orthography or Rasm al-Uthmani a must? Is it wajib? So, the scholars say that there's a consensus of companions. And once you have a consensus is binding. And there is a great a benefit in this, because it shows the care with which they recorded the Quran. And that care itself is recorded in the Quran. So the Ummah is united that that's the khat we use for mushafs. But scholars also allow, when you quote a Quranic verse, it can be written in regular Arabic orthography or imla. So for example, if you were teaching somebody and you wrote Ar-Rahman like that with the alif written rather than as a dagger alif, then that's acceptable. So in the next video, it talks about the inconsistency of people, of some groups, who accept this but don't accept some things. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.